Hello everyone, welcome to my Last of Us Part 2, Survivor difficulty, no damage, no crafting, no upgrades, no listen mode, no saves walkthrough. And this is Seattle Day 2 for Abby's section, and we are immediately in a stealth encounter, which is very simple. And it requires a bit of patience, because what I'm going to do is I am going to go prone inside of a bush, and I'm going to wait for just the right moment where the enemies will move away, and I'll be able to take out the Seraphite that is right in front of the door that I need to use in order to get out of here. And this is the bush right here. But right here, you need to get into this area like this. You need to go prone in this exact position, being parallel with the wall that's to your left, so that this guy who's coming back towards me will not be able to see you. He'll see you for a little bit, but he won't actually see you fully. And the moment he walks away, it indicates that the enemies are going to be walking away as well, and this will give you an opening to take out the Seraphite that's on the door. And I'm going to use the crossbow in order to do that. You can choose to strangle her as well, but the crossbow is definitely a better option. There he is. He's looking at me. See, he can't even see me somehow. Normally at that range, the enemies are supposed to see you, but for some reason, when you enter this stalking bush in this particular position, he can't see you. It's very odd. But once these two enemies move to these particular directions, I'm going to take her out with the crossbow. And somebody kinda sees me, but it doesn't matter. And I'm about to get through this door right here. I mean, you will get moments where the Seraphites will spot you, but the moment you finish doing this little sequence with the triangle button, the enemies will not be able to shoot you even if they spot you. And that is the end of that sequence. It's very easy. And something I would definitely like to voice about this game, it's not necessarily a problem that this game has, it's just the fact that there's not a lot of reason to do the encounter select on this game because the encounters end very quickly. I mean, look at this encounter right here. This encounter right here, this is a very simple one. All I'm going to do is I'm going to melee the window that's to the right, and it'll most likely attract every single enemy, but this can sometimes happen where the runner who's near the window can jump through the window, and you're gonna need to somehow take her out without her spotting you, but she spots me here, unfortunately, so the enemies are gonna start coming towards me. And it's not too bad. As long as you know exactly how the enemies move, you'll be fine. I mean, there's a clicker right there. There's gonna be a couple of shamblers, but they're nowhere in sight for some reason, and I've gotten past them. And that has been a very short encounter, but would you really want to replay that in the encounter select? You know, I like the idea of the encounter select, and the encounters on this game are a lot of fun, but there's not a lot of reason to use the encounter select once you've actually figured out the strategy. And then moving on, we have this sequence right here, which isn't even a part of the encounter select, which I'm honestly surprised because this sequence gave me a lot of trouble, and I actually discovered if you come over here while you're crouched, the enemies will lose you entirely, and you can use this to your advantage to take him out silently. And I'm going to actually demonstrate a technique that I discovered on the section where it is entirely possible to do corner takedowns on enemies if you dodge at the right moment and they're in the correct animation. Like, watch this. He's going to do the animation and searching around the corner, but because I timed it and I got to his side, I was able to grab him. And I originally thought once they went into that animation of just getting startled, you wouldn't be able to take him out, but it turns out you can. But the main reason why it's so hard to take him out during that animation is because they turn while they're doing it. But because I was in the right position, he didn't have enough time to turn towards me, so I was able to get the prompt and take him out. And I'm going to do the same thing on another enemy coming up. And on this sequence, there are only 4 enemies, so I've killed at one of them. There's 3 of them left. This guy is going in this direction, so I'm going to use this time to take him out. It's very easy to take out these guys, but I get into a bit of a close spot with 2 enemies because I didn't actually realize both of these upcoming enemies were closing in at the same time. So there's going to be an enemy to my left, and then there's an enemy to my right, and I didn't realize the enemy on the right was there, but I was very lucky to grab the enemy on the left, because when you have human shields on this game, the enemies will not shoot you so long as you don't give them your body. You have to make sure that the human shield is between yourself and the other enemy, so that they don't shoot you. And something else I've noticed about the human shield mechanic, if you have a human shield and you shoot an enemy in the leg so that you can immediately grab them and use them as a human shield, they will actually escape the grab faster, and you won't be able to use them as a human shield for long. And I think it's like that to make sure you're not exploiting the system to your advantage too much. But this is where I'm in a bit of a spot of bother, because this enemy is going to come around the corner, I'm going to grab her, and then this other guy is going to spot me, and I'm very lucky he prioritized Lev instead of me. He could have easily shot me. But there we go, look at that. I managed to time it perfectly, and I wasn't even trying to time it perfectly, I just got it. I was very lucky just then. It's something you have to bear in mind when you're trying to do that particular method. You have to make sure you're facing the corner when you're in cover so that when you dodge, your character will actually go around the corner and not just go all the way to the side. And it is a pretty reliable method, although it's very hard to time. Because if you time it too early, they'll spot you very quickly before you have a chance to do the grab on them, and if you're too late, they won't even do the startle animation, they'll just immediately attack you if they're in that animation that's searching the corner. So, getting that timing down can be very difficult. And I'm just going to transition over to the next part, which is just a simple stealth encounter, and I was able to get it done on the first try. Originally, I had a lot of trouble with this encounter because I could not figure out the best way to do this, and I had to kill a couple of enemies, but it turns out it's actually very easy. Even if you're having to restart the encounter, this will still work. And what you have to make sure you're doing is keeping watch over the enemies that are on the other side, because there are times when they can see you if you miss time when you're supposed to move. The awareness markers can definitely help to understand which enemies are seeing you or not, but this part right here, you have to crouch so that the guy on the left doesn't hear you, and then you have to wait until that bottom enemy is over there so that you can jump across safely, and then you need to go over here and go prone, and she will not be able to spot you as easily. Although right there, I didn't go prone on this recording, which is something you shouldn't do, because the guy that you got past previously can still see you when you're over here. But you can sprint at a particular point, and that is the end of this sequence. I've decided to leave in the moment where Abby is going across the cranes, because I think it's a really cool moment, because it definitely helps separate this game from The Last of Us Part 1 when it comes to its tone, and when it comes to its different settings, and it gives me a moment to talk about Abby, and also about Lev, and the relationship that builds throughout this whole entire game, when it comes to these two. So, I didn't actually realize Lev was transgender in this game, and when it comes to the portrayal of transgender characters on this game, it's a big issue that this game receives a lot of, and I don't really understand why. You know, I haven't really looked into the details on that deeply, but I'm not even seeing the point in doing so, because I know for sure it's going to be some really dumb reasons, but when Lev said in the game that he shaved his head and that's why the Seraphites were after him, I didn't actually realize during my blind playthrough why that was a big deal to them. I just thought at the time, you know, it meant that he was trying to make himself more of a soldier, and that was not permitted, because maybe they had some special rights to them, but it turns out it was to indicate that Lev was going from being a girl to a boy, and indicating his transgender nature. But unlike most people, I don't view transgender people as being aliens. I think a lot of people just criticize the transgender characters on this game because it conflicts with what they've been brought up to believe with as a child. And I know that in a lot of religions, especially Christianity, they really take offense to the idea of homosexuality and a transgender sexuality. And I just think that's the only reason people are giving criticism to this game when it comes to Lev. And it's just the most bigoted kind of comment I've ever heard from people. And compared to those idiots, I absolutely loved Lev on this game. I really do. And I absolutely love Abby as well. You know, by the end of the game, I really came to love Abby. You know, when I started playing as Abby, I didn't start to think, oh, this is going to be bad. I wanted to play as Ellie, now I'm playing as the main villain. But you gotta remember, in the world of The Last of Us, there's no such thing as heroes and villains. They established this a lot in the first Last of Us. You know, remember what David said? You kill to survive, and so do we. And then with Joel, like, Joel expressed to Ellie in Pittsburgh that he's been on both sides, and he's killed a lot of innocent people, so he's not exactly a true hero. He has tragic flaws that perfectly befit a villain. It's just, it's not explored a lot in the first Last of Us, because you're focusing on who Joel is right now, not what he was in the past. And with Abby, I honestly feel like Abby comes across as being like Joel when it comes to her relationship to Lev. You know, it's almost like she's very protective of Lev, and they came to really trust each other. And at the beginning, they didn't trust each other initially, but they really came to care about each other in a way that doesn't feel as stereotypical as that of a cliched mom, or a cliched, like, girlfriend, or a cliched anything like that. You know, I feel like you can't properly summarize Abby and Lev's relationship with one single word, because that completely diminishes the value of this kind of relationship. And it's the same case with Joel and Ellie. You know, you can't properly summarize Joel and Ellie's relationship with something as simple as being a pseudo-father or a pseudo-husband or anything like that. I feel like leaving the meaning of their relationship to query is perfectly accommodating for what their relationship is supposed to represent, and it gives it a lot of value. And once again, going back to the whole idea that there's no such thing as heroes or villains in this game, there's only survivors, you know, Abby is portrayed the way she is because she's kind of a reflection of Ellie. You know, they feel like very similar characters at times with their personalities, with the way they perceive the world. It's so interesting. And I think it was a very interesting way of making this seemingly simple revenge story have more complexity to it. And furthermore, when Joel made the statement that Ellie's immunity meant nothing, it got me thinking. It related perfectly to the idea that there weren't any heroes or villains in the world of The Last of Us, only people. Everyone in the world of The Last of Us feels important, and thus, this is why Abby and Lev's relationship feels very similar to Joel and Ellie's relationship. And because of this, that's why I care about Abby and Lev just as much as Joel and Ellie. And it's one of the main reasons why I really cared about what happened to Abby at the end of the game, where she was tortured so much by the Rattlers, and she just wanted to get out of there, and she wanted to save Lev, and Ellie was just becoming the villain at that moment. And she found Abby in that particular position where she was just put into the brink of physical and psychological torture, and Abby just didn't want to fight Ellie, but Ellie was making her do it, and I felt really bad for Abby at that moment. And I think that's why when Ellie was in the middle of drowning Abby, that she had that vision about Joel, that she realized what she was doing, it just didn't feel right. You know, she felt like she was becoming someone completely different, and I think the way they just delivered on that, it resonated with me so much. I really felt a lot of emotion from that scene where Ellie was about to kill Abby, but she spared her in the end. And the way they just did that, it definitely showcases why I really love the story of The Last of Us so much. And I especially love its use of subtleties, like the final scene of the game, where Ellie returns back to her house, and she has that guitar, and she can't even play it because Abby tore off her fingers. You know, the last connection she had to Joel was completely lost in that moment because Ellie decided to seek revenge, and it almost became an obsession with her. And Laser C summed it up very perfectly by making such a statement, and I 100% agree with him. I thought that was just a really nice form of subtlety on the game's part. And it's the kind of subtlety that only a truly invested Last of Us player will understand. But as it stands, all the people that hate this game, they have some of the most superficial mindset ever. They need everything to be in their face, like it's some cliched action-adventure game, or like it's a Michael Bay film. Like, those are the kind of people that are unfortunately giving the wrong kind of criticism to this game, and it's completely unacceptable. Like DB, Seraphim17, those are just two out of so many other individuals who I would honestly condemn to hell for hating this game. Anyone who hates the Last of Us series is just a miserable excuse for a human being. And they are no different to a clinically diagnosed sociopath and a clinically diagnosed psychopath, because those are the only kind of individuals who will exert absolutely no emotions whatsoever when it comes to looking at this game. And they're the ones who will most likely have the very first thoughts of looking at a game being the portrayal of transgender characters and the sexuality of women and all sorts of unimportant aspects. All I gotta say to them is fuck them. I don't care about them whatsoever. They can go die in a hole for all I care, and I will just condemn them to hell. But enough about that. We're about to go on to the next encounter, and this next encounter we need to get a gas mask for Lev, and I remember on my blind playthrough, this room was kind of tense, because there's a room that's locked, and it's filled with infected, and you can interact with the door, and you can hear the noises, and I did not want to ever open that door in my blind playthrough, but it turns out it's just a bunch of stalkers, and you can get the sequence done in seconds. I'm just glad it's a bunch of stalkers and nothing else. I will gladly take stalkers over anything else in this room. And the way you want to do this encounter is you just want to run past them, but make sure you get rid of the first stalker with a strike animation, and then you should start running past all the rest of them. And when you kill this guy, there's going to be a stalker to your right, and then there's a stalker behind this corner over here, so get ready to dodge. There's this guy over here, and then when you get to this crack, that's the end of the section. Very simple. And now we're going to descend down into the depths of hell with this section here. And the stalkers now have a new ability where they can hide inside of the wall and attack you. And they have the same kind of hearing threshold as clickers, where they can hear you while you're crouched, so you have to move very slowly. And be very careful when they do decide to attack you from the wall. They have a lot of range because, of course, it's a paired animation system, and it seems like they're programmed to grab you unless you do the dodge animation. So you have to be wary of them. But be careful when jumping over here. There's a clicker to your left. And we're going to be able to gain access to the flamethrower in this part. I don't know where else the flamethrower can spawn. I think it might potentially spawn in the basement of the hospital area coming up. But it's easy access right here. So just go get it. And I'm just aiming here just to get past this clicker so that he doesn't hear me. And I can move at my fastest speed while not having to tilt the analog stick forward. And be very careful that you don't go all the way to the right after picking up the flamethrower, because there's a stalker hiding inside of a wall and he will spot you easily. But here's the flamethrower. And now we're going to descend further down into this building. And interesting thing, this whole entire encounter isn't classed as a main encounter, even though you are dealing with a lot of enemies. And I think that's only because the enemies are spread out a lot, and you're only encountering a couple of enemies in each room. And this one right here, there are just two stationary clickers. And this one here, you're going to have to move very cautiously. Or you can take him out using a crossbow bolt, which I'm going to do here. I kind of wish that instead of having to craft shivs, you could use the arrows from your crossbow as a stealth weapon, and it would allow you to take down a lot of these enemies. But you lost it in the process, and I think that would be a really interesting way of giving the arrows another kind of purpose, rather than just bringing back the shivs and not being so reliant upon crafting resources. Because there's never a moment in this game, like not even in my blind playthrough, did I ever need to make shivs as Abby. And the only reason why I did it in my blind playthrough is because in the first Last of Us, I never used shivs for anything. I only ever used shivs as a way to open shiv doors in the first Last of Us, but never to stealth kill an enemy, because there's already a number of ways of being able to get rid of enemies without the use of shivs. And it's the same case with this game. So I think it would be very cool if you could just use these crossbow bolts as a close range stealth option, because at least you're using them for something. But once you're over here, this is the end of the encounter. There are even shamblers in this area, but I don't even know how to get to these shamblers. So they're not a problem whatsoever. And now we're going to move on to this encounter right here. And it's very simple. And there is a bloater in this encounter here, and you do not have to engage with it, thankfully. I'm very glad that this game only has 3 bloaters, because fighting bloaters on this game is not the most interesting thing unless you have the ammo necessary to deal with them. And as I demonstrated in the final part of the LE section, 6 shotgun shells can help against bloaters. But even still, though, I still don't want to ever put myself in a position where I need to fight bloaters. Like, I would have much rather have Naughty Dog make a brand new enemy type, rather than just inflating the health of an enemy type you've known a long time ago in the first Last of Us. And I think that's one of my main criticisms with this game. There's not that many enemy types that are new. The only new enemy types you ever come across are the Shamblers and the Rat King, and that's really it. And the Rat King is only reserved for the boss fight. But every other enemy, they're just reimaginings of enemies you fought previously in the first Last of Us. So I kind of feel like Naughty Dog was a little misleading with the idea that you would be encountering more terrifying mutations. So that's just my biggest gripe with the game so far. But that is the end of that sequence. The crossbow really trivializes the sequence. And I'm just going to transition over to the hospital area, because there's nothing important happening in the hiatus between these moments. And the generator here will unlock the rooms on the bottom level of the hospital. And it will also release a couple of clickers, and there are a couple of stalkers hiding in the walls. And this is all pretty simple, because this is not classed as a main encounter, and it's obvious why, because there's not a lot of enemies in this encounter. And all I'm just going to do here is just kill them with the crossbow, because I'll get a lot of crossbow bolts back in Seattle Day 3. But the sequence is going to begin now once we get through this door. There's that clicker, so I'm just going to headshot him. And then I'm going to go over to the room to my left to kill the stalker in that room, and then take out the rest of the clickers. And it's all pretty simple. So during this time, I'll just talk about the Rat King. So the Rat King is one of my favorite fights on this game. He is so fun to fight because he dies very fast. And it's all a matter of making sure that you're staying ahead of him and you're not putting him into a state where he's going to be doing his acid attack. His acid lasts for such a long time compared to the standard Shambler. And he looks incredible. And when I first saw him on my blind playthrough, I was absolutely amazed, and it felt like an enemy type that the Last of Us series wouldn't really have. And it's the same with the music. The music that plays during that boss fight sounds completely out of place in the Last of Us world, but it's so much fun, and it really redeems itself. So I'm absolutely amazed that Naughty Dog was able to make a sequence that felt very out of place in the Last of Us series, but awesome at the same time. And I've included this one right here because I especially like this one where you first see it. It's unlike anything you've ever seen before in the Last of Us series. Look at it. You can clearly tell that this thing has not been around for like 5 or 10 years. It's been around since the start of the outbreak, which is roughly 25 years ago. And I've seen a lot of mutations from the Cordyceps mutation, but I did not think it would get this ridiculous. And apparently the reason why it's called the Rat King is because Rat King refers to a phenomenon where rats tie themselves together via their tails, and it's a phenomenon that is oftentimes associated with the supernatural, and it's oftentimes associated with a collective mass of something. So the collective mass of all of the patients that were down in this hospital when the infection first began, it all became this, an amalgamation of runners, stalkers, clickers, and a bloater. And as such, it has the same abilities as all those other enemies. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And Abby is the only one who has bared witness to a mutation like this. And she even says at the end of this boss fight that no one will believe her by the end of this. And it's going to grab you right here, and you're going to have to use the axe to save yourself from this enemy. And once we have fallen through the floor, the fight is going to begin. And the flamethrower, as I mentioned, is so powerful against this guy. But before I use the flamethrower, I'm going to use a couple of my rounds from my other weapons in order to deal a lot of damage to this guy. There are a lot of rooms you can go to in this area right here, and they have Fedra cases that have ammunition. I think the ammo respawns in those Fedra cases after a certain amount of time, so you don't have to worry too much about it. And there's also a lot of crafting resources in case you need it, but I do not recommend using your pipe bombs against this guy because it's best to save it for Seattle Day 3. But he's going to break through the walls, he's going to be smashing through doors, and at some point, he's going to take enough damage that one of the stalkers that is part of the amalgamation will be released, and it'll come after you. But I don't even get the chance to see the stalker in the second phase because I kill this guy so quickly. And you want to know the greatest thing about this fight? There aren't like endless runners just spawning in, attacking you as you're trying to deal with this guy. It's a 1v1. This is personal. This is a fight for your life right now. And you're in this dark area. It's awesome. This is practically the kind of fight you'd see in a good Resident Evil game. This practically gives Resident Evil 2 Remake a run for its money with how crappy the boss fights are in Resident Evil 2 Remake. This guy dies fast compared to the bosses on Resident Evil 2 Remake. And admittedly, there are some bosses that are a lot of fun to fight in Resident Evil 2 Remake, but most of them are pretty bad. And I'm looking at you, G3 Birkin, worst boss ever on Resident Evil 2 Remake. And I'm about to transition over to the second phase. And now for the second phase, the stalker is going to come out. And I am amazed it's able to get out. Wow. Ridiculous. This guy is absolutely insane. I don't even think Resident Evil is this crazy with its mutations. I don't remember seeing any kind of collective mass of anything in Resident Evil whatsoever. I mean, I've fought giant enemies before in Resident Evil, but nothing like this. It's so much fun. And the flamethrower is going to be so handy for this part. And look at that, she's already saying, I am not dying here. And when Abby says, I am not dying here, it means the boss is very close to death. And all I need is just one more shot from my hunting pistol, and the boss is dead. Look at that. This is exactly what a boss fight should feel like. A very short, but sweet boss fight that is challenging for all the right reasons. And admittedly, this guy isn't that challenging. His moveset is pretty simple, but he dies fast before you even have a chance to recognize that because your weaponry is so good against him. And just take the time to collect any loot, and proceed onward to the third phase of the fight, where you're going to be fighting the Evolved Stalker. And I'm going to actually do something very different to what you normal people might do, and I'm going to fight this guy melee only. And fighting this guy melee only is pretty challenging if you're not understanding how his AI works. If you're planning on fighting the Evolved Stalker melee only, you have to bear in mind, do not mash him down. If he pushes you away, there is a high possibility that he will do a counterattack where he will throw one of those mycotoxic sacks at you, and it's impossible to avoid unless you run in a particular way, and the room is very, very narrow, so there's not a lot of opportunities to use that to your advantage. And I'm not too sure how long the acid lasts after he's used his mycotoxic sack, but just assume it's for quite a while. And this guy pretty much has the exact same kind of AI as the Stalkers, where if you get near him while he's hiding, he will come after you, and he's gonna start to attack you. So when you dodge him, always make sure you attack him. It's best to try to attack him while he's in hyper armor, so you can get more hits out. Because if you make him flinch, it's gonna make it impossible for you to mash him down, because he will do that counter attack. And anytime he decides to come towards you and he just stands still, it means he's going to do his range attack. But when he does the range attack, you can just run right past him. It's a very fair move. If memory serves, I think in the first Last of Us, bloaters had the ability to throw mycotoxin sacks behind them, even though the animation that they were doing was an animation that they would do if they're trying to throw it forward, not backwards. So it could come across as being very bullcrap. Correct me if I'm wrong, if that is the case. But right now, he's hiding somewhere else, and you can just shoot this guy with your weapons. He'll die very quickly. But I just decided I'd do something a little differently compared to the normal individual. And it makes this walkthrough a lot more interesting when you're seeing me do something that you would think wouldn't be possible, but it actually is. Like, this fight is actually designed for melee only, because the gameplay doesn't fall apart, and he dies very fast. When I'm talking about gameplay falling apart, think of like Resident Evil 6 doing kill-all runs, or trying to do Resident Evil 5 knife only. Like, the gameplay just isn't built for such restrictions, and the gameplay really falls apart, and anyone who believes in such runs, I just question, what the heck are you doing with your time playing this game? Like, get a life. If you believe in stupid runs, and you believe that gameplay that looks unpolished, repetitive, or improperly paced is fun, that just shows that you're taking a game for granted, have tunnel vision, or practically need to achieve more of a desired effect to feel something from the game, like some simple drug addict. It's just unbelievable that people would try to maintain this belief and then try to force their romance upon other people. It's so stupid. I mean, I don't get it whatsoever. I don't know why anyone would ever believe in anything like this. And thankfully, this is not a stupid run. This is just something that is well designed. Because, as you can see right now, I'm not struggling whatsoever with this guy because the gameplay isn't falling apart. It's designed for melee only. I mean, there's no reason to do it like this because you have plenty of resources necessary. You're free to use the shotgun, the semi-automatic rifle, the pistol, the flamethrower. Like, the flamethrower is pretty useless for the rest of the game. It's only ever useful against the Rat King, so just use it on this guy. Simple. And I'm about to deal the finishing blow to this guy in a moment, and this is it! And that will conclude this amazing boss fight, and once you have done this, all you gotta do is regroup with Lev, and that will conclude Seattle Day 2 for Abby's section. So stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.